because I think at issue for Penguins fans is the land, the value of the land, the deadlines, and the seriousness of the SEA and the URA to enforce those deadlines to take back the land.
And now it's time for No Pucks Given with Dan Kingerski of Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Penguin scoops locker room buzz and straight-up analysis. No fluff, all hockey. Now, here's Dan.
Well, it is No Pucks Given here on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms. Hi, I'm Dan Kingerski. We are at the UPMC Lemieux Complex as training camp resumes after the Monday night game in Montreal. The Penguins lose 2-1 shootout, but that really has no bearing on the story at all, does it? That was a really fun game, I think, for me to watch and probably for a lot of you for a lot of different reasons. So this podcast, episode 31 here of No Pucks Given. Two main topics, and how long it goes, I guess, is how long I talk. The first topic we're going to get into, Pittsburgh Hockey Now spent weeks digging into the situation, the land around PPG Paints Arena. The local politicians, the local political class is quite angry. They are making real threats to the Penguins. That includes seizure. The Penguins are facing some deadlines, the first one being October 22nd. We'll get into really all of that, what it really means, and how it could be impacting the sale. As one friend sort of joked with me as they clicked on the story to start reading it, like, oh, this is actually like real journalism, Dan. Yes, I spent weeks talking to everybody that we possibly could, everybody that would talk to us to really get the real story there. The second thing we're going to get into is the High-Octane training camp and preseason and how it manifested itself, what you really saw Monday night. We're going to take what we saw Monday and plug it into the bigger picture and take it a step further, extrapolate that on where everything goes from here. Because I thought it really was the first time that door opened where you got to see into the future of the Penguins. And I thought it was really interesting. We're going to get into that. But first, let's talk about the Penguins sale. First thing, I think we're going to have an announcement first few days of October. Gut feeling? I think there have been additional complications because the people who had this story first, the guys, Elliot Friedman, Pierre LeBrun, who were first on this story, expected it done a month ago. So we have to start asking ourselves why. Why hasn't it gotten to that point? Very simply, this is a $1.75 billion business deal. Such things usually don't just go, oh, okay, yeah, give me the team. Here's a check. There's a little bit more to it. I believe, though I do not know, that one of the issues that being worked through or had to be looked at closely is the land deals around the arena. Now, just to catch you up a little bit, for those of you who don't remember back in like 2006 and 7 and all of this insanity that ensued and how close the Penguins were to moving to Kansas City. The negotiations netted the Penguins the opportunity to develop the land around the arena. They don't have an obligation to do so, however. That's maybe an important distinction as we kind of that we'll talk about at the end of this little discussion here. The politicians, the Stadium and Exhibition Authority that actually owns part of the land, has been waiting for more development because they get money from these developments. They make money. The SEA is otherwise responsible for the upkeep, the maintenance, and the little stuff on all three stadiums, PPG, PNC, and Acrisure. Well, Acrisure and PNC are getting to be 25 years old now. Doesn't that make you feel old? The upkeep and the maintenance on those, the costs are climbing. PPG is 15 years old. The costs are going to start climbing here pretty soon. For example, the Penguins asked for $421,000 a few months ago. I think it was back in March or February. It's in the SEA minutes for a new server room. That's just the kind of stuff. So the politicians who serve on the SEA board and otherwise do the work are starting to say, hey, develop the land. At issue, here is, I think, the flashpoint for everything. And we've confirmed this with multiple sources. There is an October 22nd deadline by which the Penguins must begin development on the other parcels of land or forfeit them. Option B is to file an extension where they get 2 years, 2 additional years, at a cost of $126,000 and change per month. I mean, I guess in a $1.75 billion deal, a few million isn't exactly a great deal of money, but it's still an inconvenience, and there's still a time frame. And that's what I'm going to kind of merge those two options into one here. You saw in the story on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. In fact, let me share the screen here for those of you on the video side. And the story was fed up. Old, new Penguins owners face hard deadlines and anger over arena land. Senator Wayne Fontana was quoted as saying, we're fed up. Actually, he was quoted by me. Because those were one-on-one conversations that we had with multiple sources, and he went on the record with that. He also went on the record openly questioning the reason the Penguins might file an extension. Is it just for the sale, or is it to develop the land? Now, make no mistake, the SEA spoke to Pittsburgh Hockey Now with the intention of conveying the message that indeed, if the Penguins miss that 22nd deadline, they will take back all the land that hasn't been developed. If they file an extension and 2 years goes by and there's land not developed, or the development only has to start, by the way. It doesn't have to be finished, just has to start. They will take that land as well. Now, land that has been started remains property of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the FNB Tower, that's Penguins property. The Live Nation concert venue, that's Penguins property, because those developments began obviously long before the deadlines. There's a nice picture of PPG Paints Arena for those of you on the video side. It really does become a little bit of a contentious issue because it's been 15 years. And that entire area has been contentious since they built the Civic Arena 75 years ago or thereabouts. Because what it did, and I don't want to get too deep into it, because it really does become a political battle, and your worldview will shape whichever way you see it. When they built the Civic Arena in the 50s, it cut off the Hill District from downtown. At the time, the Hill District was this vibrant jazz clubs, blues clubs, where the biggest acts in the country would stop over and play a couple of shows. The Ella Fitzgeralds and Dizzy Gillespie's and all of these people on their way from Chicago to New York would stop in Pittsburgh, or Detroit to New York. They would stop in Pittsburgh and they would play. The clubs were in the Hill District. Well, when they built the original arena, that sort of cut off the Hill District from downtown and kind of created a do I say segregated? Segmented. You pick the word. Neighborhood that obviously has not thrived or flourished since then. There are parcels of land on the top side around the arena that are owned by the Urban Redevelopment Authority. They obviously have some issues and demands. Their relationship with the Penguins at best, is complicated. We were told of, peace offerings the Penguins tried to make in terms of grants and gifts of, we will help you build this or help you build that were rejected. And the URA has their own, list of grievances. We want this or we want that. The Penguins haven't come through. To get into that relationship really would become a book, which is why I shied away from it in the story, because I think at issue for Penguins fans is the land, the value of the land, the deadlines, and the seriousness of the SEA and the URA to enforce those deadlines to take back the land. Now, the Hoffman family of companies, who we expect to complete the purchase of the Penguins, like I said, in the first couple of days of October, if not sooner, they do have a commercial and a residential real estate division as part of their $2 billion company. So one would think they know what they're doing in terms of development. One question would be, how much of that do they really want to develop? You see the North Shore. So many of those businesses down there have been changing hands over and over. The Bettis Grill went. I forget the first brewery along the river that went out. Then Voodoo Brewing replaced it. Now Voodoo is out. Remember some of the great bars down there, Mullins and High Tops, that have come and gone over the years. So it's a difficult thing. And there's Stage AE. Now they're putting Live Nation around the arena. Is there enough Pittsburgh to support a couple secondary concert venues? Is there enough Pittsburgh to support a commercial and residential development up there? Don't forget, Pittsburgh right now has about a 40% occupancy, not vacancy, occupancy rate. Office buildings are plentiful. Office space is plentiful in downtown Pittsburgh. People really haven't come back since the pandemic. Some have, but it's certainly not 100%. These are all things that a developer would look at. And so I do know that affordable housing is part of the URA's request on some of that land around the arena. Will the Penguins follow through on that? Should they follow through on that? These are all questions that very much could affect the price of the Penguins. I mean, after all, if, let's just assume that FSG does apply for the extension before the October 22nd deadline, which would seem to be a foregone conclusion. It's approved and all of that. Now, I have been told if they apply for the extension, there could be some public comment, which might get interesting. But let's just assume that they apply for the extension, they get past the October 22nd deadline. Now the Hoffman family of companies has a very finite and short window to begin development. 2 years is enough time to begin one or two developments, but several? That becomes a cannonball run, so to speak, of a lot of work to do, a long way to go, and a short time to get there. I don't know if they could. And so they have to be thinking in their mind, okay, if we lose tracks X, Y, and Z of land, how much is the team really worth then? Because the Penguins will retain ownership of Live Nation because that development started. They will retain ownership of the FNB parcel where the tower is because that development has been completed. But anything not completed, they lose in a couple of years. So how much does that affect the value? Because the land itself probably isn't worth tens of millions of dollars. But fully developed, now it is worth. One of our sources put the value at all of the parcels of land developed as the city envisioned in the hundreds of millions. Okay, that seemed to be fair to me. I can neither confirm nor deny the accuracy of it, but it seems fair. Would the Hoffman family of companies pay full boat if they could lose a few $100 million of that value? Would they pay full boat if somebody else can develop that land right next door and perhaps put some things they don't want there? Perhaps put some businesses that compete with businesses they're going to put there. These are all major league issues. These are all things that if you're going to spend a couple $1 billion, well, you probably think about. And I suspect this is part of the longevity. This is part of all of the discussions and processes we've tried to reach the Hoffman family of companies to no avail. No response from there. FSG has kind of closed the door as well. We did get a statement from the Penguins for our story on Sunday. We got a statement. That was the same one they'd given to the Post-Gazette a couple of weeks ago and to the Pittsburgh Business Times. So I can't say we broke new ground with the Penguins. We did break new ground, I think, in bringing the focus onto the specifics and how it affects hockey. Okay, so I'm going to tell you personally what I think is going to happen. I think some of the land will be developed. I think some of the land should be developed. I understand the city's frustration. But ultimately, I don't think all of it gets developed because of the profit motive. I don't think there is profit in developing all of that land. I just don't. And that's probably disappointing be disappointing to the URA, which would very much like to see all of it developed and the Hill District undergo the revitalization that we've seen Garfield and Lawrenceville, and especially East Liberty undergo in the last 10 years. When I first moved to the city, would have been 2011. I lived in a $550 apartment in East Liberty. No joke. Near the Obama Academy, Alpha Historic District. Loved my little one bedroom. I moved out a year later. When my son came to live with me full time, and he went to Alderdice High School. We moved over to Shadyside and all of that. But that apartment, no kidding, 18 months later, that apartment was going for $1,250. No upgrades. That's just and I'm sure it's probably $2,000 a month now over there. Unfortunately, the Hill hasn't undergone that renovation and that revitalization. And I'm sure they're looking at the arena and the arena district as the conduit to rebuild. And I don't know how the two sides bridge that gap. I do think some of it will get developed to the SEA's satisfaction because the SEA owns the lower part. And that kind of connects right into downtown. I think it would behoove any Penguins owners. I used to love to go to the Super Bowl after the game. It's never open anymore. Like there's just not enough business right there. So I think some highway, some infrastructure, but also some commerce would go a long way around the arena. Okay. For those of you on the video side, hang on. For those of you on the podcast, on the audio side, we're going to take a quick break as Odyssey helps us pay some bills. So we'll take a break right now as well. Let's talk about the Penguins training camp. I probably droned on a little bit there about the sale. The training camp has just been high energy, high octane from the beginning. I was talking with Parker Wortherspoon Tuesday morning, having a good chat with him. Not off the record, but not really on the record, as Phil Bork's throwing sugar packets at me. Come on over. Come on, Borky, let's go. As he's almost injuring people. Good thing you were a hockey player. So we're talking about the Penguins training camp. And I think what Wortherspoon said a couple of important things that I think I'll bring to your attention. One, everybody in that room believes they are a lot better than people are giving them credit for. What Wortherspoon said was, there's a buzz in here. There's just an energy. There's a buzz right now. I agree with him. I can feel it when I walk into the room. You want to talk, or are you just going to throw things at me?
That's the greatest joy of my day.
You're not the only one. People love to throw things at me. As Wortherspoon was saying, there's a buzz in the room, and they're starting to kind of feel it. In practice, you've got coaches banging on the glass. Mike Stothers just bang, bang, bang. Energy level goes up. The skating. You saw everything Monday night. You really saw a lot on Monday night of where this team was headed. I think you got your first real glimpse into the future. Who was the best forward for the Penguins? I think the best two, actually, were Tristan Brose, not just because he got the goal. You skip over that. That was a snipe, wasn't it? But he played really well. Also, Rafael Harvey-Pinard. And if you want to say the French way, it's Harvey-Pinard. Or he gave us permission just to Americanize it, Rafael Harvey-Pinard. He gave us permission to pronounce it just, full-on Yinzer. So you're not wrong either way. I thought he was really good. And I think both of those guys have had a really good training camp. Not just maybe showing up in some of the high-profile drills and scoring some goals, but how they're skating. Their energy, their effort, their compete level, drill after drill after drill. And you saw that Monday night, shift after shift after shift. You see Bros snipe a power play goal not long after he had a great penalty kill. That's the kind of guy he is. He's going to be that third line center who chips in 15 and 40 some points. He might even have a higher ceiling. Because I'll tell you what, he is looking faster than he did at the end of last season. His skating has improved every single year that I've seen him. He sees the ice well, and he's got silky hands and some pretty good anticipation. Like he's really showing that he might reach the top end of his ceiling. And a guy like Harvey-Pinard, you can't have a gritty, emotionally engaged, hard-nosed, intense team without guys who are gritty and hard-nosed who bring that energy. That's what Harvey-Pinard sort of brings. I sort of put him right now in that 13th, 14th forward conversation. Really, I don't know if he makes it or not, but you watch him, and I kind of feel like you have to find a space for that guy. And even going all around the roster on Monday night, was there anybody that Connor Clifton didn't hit? That guy hit everything that moved. He only got credit for 3 hits, which I thought was kind of funny because he had 3 hits in the first shift. No kidding. He had 2 hits behind the net, hit a third person. That was in the first 3 minutes, and he didn't get credit for any other hits beyond that. Clifton should have had 8, 9, 10 hits. No joke. There were a couple other guys, too. Robbie Fabry, I thought showed he was an NHL player. Just no joke. He wasn't the best forward out there, but he was professionally good. And I realized how quick he is. I don't know if that's a recovery or if he was that quick with Anaheim last year. Obviously didn't get a chance to see him much playing in Anaheim. First of all, I'm not watching the Ducks play a lot of games. And he only played 44 before he broke his hand coming out of the bye week. Really never to be seen again. I'm surprised Anaheim didn't re-up him. Maybe that was his deal. I don't know. I liked Fabry. Tell you, another game I liked was Matt Dumba. And by the way, it is Dumba, not Dumba. He's had a really good training camp, which begins to make that entire right side defense even more complicated because Clifton, you assume he's got the inside track on the third pairing or the 7th defenseman role. Then you add Dumba, right-handed, Jack St. Ivany, who brings a heavy game, and he's still, he's older than a young player, but he's younger than an old player. And he's still kind of coming in to his own. Harrison Brunick had a really good game on Monday night. Talking with some colleagues Tuesday morning, some of them thought Brunick was great. I thought he was good, so take your pick. Somewhere between good and great. You can almost hear Kyle Dubas praying to the man upstairs. No, not Gary Bettman, but the big man. That the NHL and the CHL come to a last-second agreement that allows them to put one 19-year-old in the AHL this season because it would be perfect for Brunick. Brunick still has some rough edges to his game, some bad habits. We saw that in the Prospects Challenge up in Buffalo, where he could stick handle around 2 guys, just fly by them, but got in the AHL. You lose that really quick in the American Hockey League. And it would allow them to keep, a Dumba, a St. Ivany, heck, maybe both, because that blue line is going to get really crowded really quickly. Obviously, who played really well also on Monday night? Yeah, that guy, Sergei Murashov. I'm gonna maybe put some cold water. You're not gonna want to hear this, all right? You're not gonna want to hear this. He was scrambly as well. And I tweeted this, and I think a lot of fans got overly excited about what I tweeted, not without understanding the context. What I tweeted was, he reminds me of Marc-Andre Fleury in 2006. Now, if you were around for the beginning of the core four, the championship core, you remember that Fleury really struggled to stick in the NHL until like 2007. Even 2008, he was kind of losing his job to a guy named Ty Conklin because Fleury was noisy in net. Too much movement, too much scramble, a little bit too chaotic. And I saw some of that from Murashov on Monday night. But you also saw the guy makes the saves. Oh, did he make some saves on Monday? So you really saw exactly how raw and how good he is. That has to make the Penguins really excited. I don't know if I'm going to compliment Joel Blomqvist. He stopped 11 shots before they made the switch to Murashov, who really held the fort when Montreal turned it up in the third period. Blomqvist made 11 saves in what, about 30 minutes or so? But he wasn't overly tested. He wasn't bombarded. And I thought... he made the simple saves. He kept it quiet. He kept it clean. That's what you'd want. So he gets a passing grade too. Scarily enough, who didn't get a passing grade, after these guys fighting for jobs, the energy level in the training camp that's bringing out the best in everybody. The guy who really showed the worst was Ryan Graves. That's not the start you want for a guy who has to reestablish himself with the team. Even though there's a new head coach, and even though you try to scrub the past, there can be no denying that it's an issue that Graves was a healthy scratch last year. There's no denying that if he didn't have a 6-year contract, he probably would have been a healthy scratch long before he was. And for him to take just a couple of really bad penalties, almost to the point where I laughed out loud, like, what are you doing? The tripping penalty was comical almost. It was almost like Marx Brothers slapstick for no reason. And we gave him an F in the report card. So that's going to be an interesting thing. Will they send a guy with 4 years remaining on his contract to the American Hockey League, thus essentially banishing him to the hinterlands? And how will Kyle Dubas handle this? Because we're coming to a point where if Dubas follows through on his words, and he will deal with the, quote, rippling effects of keeping young players who have earned it, regardless of how the veterans are playing. I think that was an important part of his sentence, where if the young players earn it, they stay. End of sentence. And he will deal with the effects. So what happens if you've got a $15 million press box in the American Hockey League? That's not good for morale down there. You're going to have a lot of disgruntled veterans, I think, as Bros and Brunick and St. Ivany and Rafael Harvey-Pinard, and just down the list of guys claim spots. Going to be quite interesting on if the Penguins follow through, if these players can follow through, if they keep pushing as they did Monday night. Because I love the effort. I love the intensity. I love the effort. That's the kind of team that the Penguins want to put on the ice. Now, just imagine dropping Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin into that fizzy sort of mix. The Penguins actually aren't going to be bad. If they can play with that emotional engagement, you can kiss your lottery pick goodbye. That's for darn sure. And that's where we're going to wrap up the podcast. The Penguins are going to hit the other ice sheet behind me. And I want to make sure that I am there for that. For No Pucks Given on the Odyssey Network and the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platform, YouTube, and all of the places you get these lovely little podcasts. Do me a favor, like, subscribe, and check out PittsburghHockeyNow.com. I'm Dan Kingerski, and we'll talk again on Wednesday. We'll do the live chat Wednesday afternoon. I might have to bump it an hour forward, an hour backward, depending on the Penguins' practice schedule and how that falls. But we're going to try to do it at 1 o'clock Wednesday, the live chat for all of you. So comment away, have some fun, and we will talk on Wednesday. Have fun.